2020 was a big year for American democracy, and it was also a turbulent one. In one of the most contentious elections in living memory, amid a global pandemic, America saw the largest voter turnout for 80 years, with 62% of eligible Americans casting a vote. But, unlike most election years, the vast majority of voters exercised their democratic voice not in polling centers, but with mail-in ballots. Although the percentage of mail-in votes has been growing steadily for more than a decade, it shot up to 46% of all votes cast due to the pandemic. On the other side, in-person voting fell to a low of around 28%. While it might seem like having a turnout of nearly 160 million people would be an enormous win for American democracy, Republican lawmakers have launched a sweeping campaign across America to make it harder for people to vote, with a particular eye at limiting mail-in voting. Fueled by baseless allegations of voter fraud, Republicans in 14 states have enacted 22 laws that restrict people's access to vote. These laws have been passed between the 1st of the year and the 14th of May, with 16 other states pursuing similar legislation.
Well, the rollbacks in voting rights are happening in states where Republicans are in control and where the states are real political battlegrounds. That includes states like Iowa, Georgia, Texas, and Wisconsin.
Here's why mail-in voting has become the key fight in American politics and how this new legislation could help determine the results of the 2024 election. While 2020 did see a huge increase in voting, this increase was largely split down partisan lines, with nearly 60% of all mail-in ballots being cast by Democrats, compared to only 30% being cast by Republicans. A poll from the Pew Research Center suggests that this division was driven by differing narratives over election fears, with the majority of Republicans citing concerns over election fraud being the main reason they voted in person.
I think the foundation for all of this starts with Donald Trump. While he was president, particularly in the last year of his presidency, he railed against voting by mail. He made unsubstantiated allegations that ballots were being submitted by non-citizens, people were voting multiple times, that other countries had sent ballots to the United States and that they were being counted. None of that has been backed up by any of the recounts or audits or investigations that have been done, but it set the stage for Republicans to buy into a narrative that voting by mail was fraudulent, it was problematic. And you see state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans moving to curtail absentee voting. It's really just the latest step in what has been about a year and a half of rhetoric and allegations about absentee voting on the Republican side of the aisle.
Republicans claim these new measures are necessary to guarantee the security of U.S. elections. But critics claim the legislation is being used to limit who has access to the vote, and perhaps unduly influence the results of the next election.
I think simultaneously the bills are going to affect Democratic voters more than Republican voters, and minority voters more than white voters. In many states, it's difficult to tell those two things apart because efforts to undermine Democrats are also efforts to undermine, in particular, African American voters.
Let's take a closer look at some states where the most aggressive legislation has been pushed. In 2020, Democrats won Georgia by a very narrow margin, with just 0.3% of the electorate flipping the historically Republican state in favor of Joe Biden. Data from state election officials show that this was largely down to a rise in absentee voting. But despite Georgia going to Democrats in the presidential race, the state Senate and the state's governor remain Republican, allowing them to push laws like Senate Bill 202. The bill limits the amount of time that voters have to request a mail-in ballot, down from 6 months to 3 months. It requires a state ID for absentee voting, and it caps the amount of ballot drop boxes in the state to 1 per 100,000 voters. That means in the metro Atlanta area, where Democrats saw nearly half of their new gains last year, the number of drop boxes would be reduced down from 94 all the way to 23.
Undercutting the use of a really secure method that lots of voters took advantage of. And other states, including Florida and Texas and Wisconsin, are also making moves to limit drop boxes.
In states with such razor-thin margins, this legislation could have major implications. But Democrats are attempting to push back on a federal level with the For the People Act, which would enshrine comprehensive voter rights on a nationwide level.
The bill does a lot. It would implement same-day voter registration, automatic voter registration, online voter registration. It would mandate a certain amount of early voting in every state. It would implement new ethics requirements. So it's a big piece of legislation.
Most importantly, it would establish a system to protect mail-in voting by requiring states to allow any eligible voter to request a mail-in ballot and to send out applications at least 60 days before Election Day. It would expand the number and location of drop boxes, and it would prohibit states from requiring ID, aside from a signature. The For the People Act has already passed the House of Representatives, and it's expected to face a vote in the Senate later this month, but its future is uncertain.
The bill as it stands is very unlikely to become law. It has passed the House of Representatives by a party line vote. It has hit a roadblock in the Senate where the Democrats have 50 seats and the Republicans have 50 seats. And not all the Democrats are on board. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia has just announced that he is opposed to the bill. So right now, the bill requires 60 votes in the Senate. That means it would require 10 Republicans to come over and join the Democrats. There's no chance of that happening the way the bill stands.
The fight over mail-in voting in America is far from over. But even if the For the People Act fails to be made into law, the intentions of the two parties is clear. With Democrats wanting to expand the vote and Republicans wanting to limit it, the ultimate winner of this legislative battle could be the winner of the next election.